I'm Max Rogers. As we all know, racism is a huge issue throughout the world and it's been going on for centuries now. I decided to come up with a law that will help end racism or at least help bring awareness about it. I interviewed 3 different candidates to help the issue. I interviewed Armando Gillis, Jim Nisbet, and Howard Place. But before I show you these interviews, I'm going to read a piece out of the Catechism. It states, "Racism is not merely one sin among many. It is a radical evil dividing the human family." Thank you.
Humane, generous, unitas. The English translation on the unity of the human race. Now this was a draft of encyclical planned by Pope Pius XI, and he had 3 Jesuits under the leadership of John Lafarge come up with the draft. Now this draft condemned racism, anti-Semitism, and the persecution of Jews, but it was never issued. The reason it was never issued is because Pope Pius died in 1939 as the draft was being written. And because of this, it is also known as the hidden encyclical or the lost encyclical. Now, it was kept secret all the way until 1995 when France found it and released it. And as you can see, racism isn't something new to our days. It's been a battle for generations and generations, even back in 1939 was one of the things that the Pope was trying to rid for our world.
So do you think that I made up a new law saying that if you get caught committing an act of racism that you'll be tried in the court and the court will decide whether you're guilty or okay? And do you think this will help end racism or at least just bring up awareness about it to hopefully other people?
Well, first of all, I think it would make things worse because the definition of what racism is not clear. That's one of the problems with the law in general, is just how do you define certain things. And with racism, I doubt if we'd ever come up with a clear definition of what racism is. And also, you have the snowball effect. You have comedians that use race in their humor. You have people who have good relationships with each other that may say something that might be racially insensitive and might be overheard by somebody else. So I think it'll just open up a can of worms that will make society a lot worse. Also, when you're talking about degree of harm, I think sometimes, in some cases, we've gotten to a place in society today where we're hypersensitive to things. Like, for example, shows like the Dukes of Hazzard has a Confederate flag on the General Lee, so they pulled it off the air. When during the time that show was on television, there were no complaints about this Confederate flag on this General Lee. Shows like All in the Family with Archie Bunker, who was a racist, and that was the joke, that he was a racist. Okay, and people were okay with exploring racial issues, but there wasn't any hatred directed toward Archie Bunker because he was just a guy who had some different views on things. But his character, he was actually a pretty nice guy. Okay, then you have a show like The Jeffersons where George Jefferson calls people Hawkey on the show. Okay, and that was a joke. And I think we've gotten to a point in society where we're so hypersensitive about things that I think if you put a law in place at this point in time, it would basically just cause, I wouldn't say chaos, but there'd be nothing but conflicts that would come from it. Also, with laws, we have hate crimes laws, and those are for severe acts that are racially motivated or motivated by race. And even hate crimes laws are being challenged because there's some people say all crimes are hate crimes because that's, when you get to a point where you're getting ready to take somebody's life, then you're at a point where you have hatred for this person, so it's a hate crime. So I don't think we can legislate our way out of social problems. I think if you look at the history of legislation, there were things in the Constitution that should have protected blacks, but it's the interpretation of those laws and how they're carried out is what you have to depend on. And so you really depend on the person's heart. No matter how many laws you pass, it's the hearts of men and women that determine what society is going to look like. So I think we should focus on, trying to change the hearts and minds of men and women outside of the law, maybe through our religious institutions, our schools, because I don't think the laws can help us.
All right, that's perfect, actually. Thank you. So, Jim.
All right.
Yeah. How you doing, Raj?
Good. I made up a new law saying that if you get caught in the act of racism, that you'll be tried in the court of law, and the jury will decide your fate. Do you think that this would help maybe not only end racism, or at least bring up awareness about it?
Well, I think it's a great overall thought, and definitely heighten up the racism ideas and all, but it seems like a lot of mayhem that's going to go on after this. That can't be good. And well, I'm not gonna lie to you. How do we judge what is and isn't racism, and what level can we say that something is and isn't racist? Can you answer that question for me?
Well, yes. That's why we're bringing it.
Whoa! Don't spill me.
That's why we're bringing it to the jury, so they're going to decide whether they think it's racism.
All right. And do you consider verbal racism an element, or just physical, right? Are you talking segregation, or are you talking just from someone making a comment about a skin tone?
I feel like it's more of kind of any type that you can do. Segregation will be probably more of a effect on what the jury will think of you, but I think that all around it's just kind of a law that will just hopefully bring up awareness.
Do you think that this will lead to a lot of diverse racism, like reverse racism, where people will be able to take advantage of this this position, and they can I don't know, maybe more people instead of just not being racist, they're gonna completely switch around and have to feel like they're
So,
giving
Mr. Place, my law is that any act of racism is going to be held in the court of law, and they're going to decide your outcome of whether you go to jail or not. Do you think this will be a good way to help end racism, or just kind of deal with it a little bit more?
It certainly is a way of trying to bring into the public forum acts of racism, and as a community help us engage what is in fact racial slurring or acts of racism. It seems like allowing these things into a court of law sort of officializes the process of dealing with racism. It could definitely be a step in the right direction.
All right,
Is it
so-
going to solve the problem of people being racist? Probably not by itself.
All right.
Yeah.
That's all I needed. Thank you.
In conclusion, to Max and I's interview, we learned that our law that we created will either bring destruction or create awareness for racism. I think that as Catholics, we all should work on accepting others as equals and just try to get along instead of leaning towards violence. Let's go Blues!